On this week's episode of Carlie's Couch, we discuss how centering joy can change your life.
Happy Monday, everybody. Welcome to Carlie's Couch. Hey, Carlie.
Hey, Lexi.
I know that this is a good episode for you because in the last one, you talked about how centering joy has changed your life. So excited to get into that, to talk about that today. But first, we're going to go through your responses to the question from the couch.
Which was, what is the best phone call that you have ever received?
I don't even remember phone calls like that.
I was like, do you have any that come top of mind?
No.
I'm sure I've gotten a lot of really good ones, but one I know for sure was whenever I got accepted into business school at USC.
Oh, yeah. They call you?
Yeah, because I applied. I got the interview because I applied third round because I was supposed to go to business school in Barcelona. And then that didn't work out because of my financial aid. So I applied to 2 schools, third round, did my interviews, and then I got the call like a week later. Remember, I was going to the dentist. And I was like, oh, hello. And they're like, hey, we're excited. We want to have you. And this was like mid-June, and we were starting in July. And I was like, oh, so my life was like super fast, but I was so excited.
But when they called, did you know it was going to be a positive thing, or it was like you weren't sure?
I wasn't sure. But I just remember I was walking in. Dr. Lay, shout out to her. She did my braces. But I was about to walk in, and so I sat in my car, and I was so nervous because I saw University of Southern California, and I was like, oh my gosh. And then, ta-da!
Good. That's a good example. For a lot of things that I'm thinking about, they are not calls. So I barely remember like a phone call that would be like something super awesome. But of course, anytime you get good news like that, that's always good, especially when you're not sure what it's going to be.
Yeah, and that's like life-changing. I was so ready to leave, and so it felt great. I was like, oh, I'm back, baby, because after my financial aid for Spain fell through, I was like, oh, no, I'm going to be here another year. Jesus Christ. But thank God I wasn't. So shout out to Nirab, the guy who interviewed me, and everything was so cool. He called me. He was so excited.
And then you moved directly from Oklahoma based on that call?
From Dallas, yeah.
Oh, that's
yeah,
right.
I was already living in Dallas doing engineering, and so I was working at the airport and got that call in mid-June, turned in my notice that I'll be quitting July 8th.
That is a fast turnaround.
Yeah, and then we started school on the 15th. So quit, move the next week, and then started the school the next week after that.
Well, we have a couple of answers from folks, and one of them said, how much time do you have, or do I have? Don't know where to start. I guess that's a good thing.
Yeah, that's Asa. So, look, he was trying. I was like, yo, just give us the top 3. Like,
dang, that's great if you have that many calls. Okay, cool.
And then another one is, got the job after a few year hiatus. I was a stay-at-home mom, and they called like 3 months after I submitted my application and did an interview.
Wow.
So a job
that does happen.
She had written off. But I've seen that it's kind of hard for stay-at-home moms or women or people who have been out of the workforce for a little bit to even come back, even with college education and experience, because you've been out of the workforce for so long. And so it's tough. And so I imagine that was super relieving. I love when y'all answer, especially so quick, because I definitely asked that this morning. So shout out to you. But today's episode, I'm very excited. Lexi and I were discussing things that have been really impactful in our lives lately. And I had a bunch of real basic answers. And then it really hit me that the thing that has really been changing my life this year noticeably is centering joy in my everyday. And we'll get into more about what that is. But when I think of, I do a lot of things. If y'all listen, even if you don't, you see that I'm always doing stuff to feel good, to love on myself, to learn, to grow. And by far, one of the biggest things that has changed my life is this action of practicing centering joy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's beautiful. When you say things like that, like I have been working on centering joy, or that's something that I've been practicing, my first thoughts are always like, okay, how do you practice joy? Like that, to me, that feels like it's a thing, like you have it or you don't. And then also for me, Carlie and I had to talk about what exactly joy is, because for me, when I hear, I'm centering joy, to me that felt like, so you want to make sure that you're always bubbly, and that when you go around everywhere, you're always like, yeah, life, stuff like that. Like, to me, when I think joy, that's like the bubbliness. But then Carlie informed me, and we really went back and forth looking at definitions and understanding it, that that's more of what happiness technically is. Mm-hmm. So Carlie, can you kind of also give that recap of kind of like that learning and that conversation to them, so that we're all on the same page? Because there might be people who are like me, where it's like, well, for me, it's like happiness is like the baseline and joy is those extra moments. But talk about what it really is.
Man, I'm laughing because the thing that came to my head when you were talking is I got that joy down in my
not
heart.
Vacation Bible
Down
School.
in
Oh
my
my
heart.
God, I do not.
Taking you way back. Anyway, back to the late
Now
1900s.
you messed up my joy thinking about that.
But when I say joy, I mean like a state of joy, like coming from like joy is your baseline. And we had to look up definitions because it was like, wait, what is joy versus happiness? And so happiness is typically a more fleeting emotion, often sparked by a particular moment or event that brings a sense of excitement or exhilaration. So those are those little those spikes. But they say like, happiness doesn't last forever and things like that because it is like a serotonin spike in your brain and you feel really good, but then sometimes you can feel empty after because it kind of empties out. Whereas joy is a more long-lasting state of being, which is characterized by contentment and satisfaction with life overall. And it is derived from this sense of like being authentic and being in alignment with your deeper self.
So I think that's helpful for you all to know like what we mean moving forward when we talk about joy, because in the definition of joy, to call it contentment, that I'm like, oh, I get that. Like I would never be like, I'm joyful. Like to me, I wouldn't feel like that's what I would be saying, as opposed to, do I feel content? And is contentment like a base? Like absolutely. So now, having learned, for me, I have to like remember to kind of reframe in my mind when we're talking about it. Like, oh, so I do have joy. It just feels kind of funny because I feel like for so long I think of joy as something else. So I think that was pretty cool for me to even learn that. And yes, I 100% think that it's important to be able to have a core and a center of contentment in everything that you do, because it almost makes everything around you more enjoyable. I think it makes the non-fun things, or like the life things that just happen, it makes it easier to navigate. And so, yes, I think that centering joy is very important.
And so then some of the questions and stuff that then Lexi and I, after we established this baseline, is like, okay, so is joy something you can just summon up then? Or like, where does it come from?
So I am thinking about that question, is joy something you can summon up? To me, I don't think you have to summon it up because it's a state of being. So you might disagree, but for me, it feels like joy is something that you have or don't have. Not to say that you can't practice things to make it more familiar, make it easier to kind of maybe bounce back, and or honestly to a point where like you don't really think about it. So even for somebody to say like, oh, I'm working on, or not even working, because you're just being intentional about centering joy, it's like, oh, that's great. And also maybe for another person, they don't have to think about it. Maybe that's the where they are. And then for other people, they may have to reach harder and even further to get to a point of even really being intentional about it. So I would say not necessarily a summon, yet I understand that maybe there's levels of how hard you have to think about reminding yourself to kind of come back to it.
Absolutely. An image of a well kind of came to my mind, in a sense it's something you can draw from, like a well.
Well.
Yeah, well.
That was that accent.
Well,
I was like, what about a whale?
a well. Like
not Free
whale.
Willy.
Not Free
Yeah.
Willy. Joy. No, but a well where you can draw on it, like when you need to, it like in fortifying moments when life is lifing or other things. It's like a general reminder, a contentment. But to your point, they might have to go a little bit further down to get to the actual thing and keep dropping that bucket.
And then what was the second part of that question you had asked?
Where does it come from?
Where does it come from? Joy comes from being yourself, because in a space where you feel free, and in a space where you don't feel held back, or in a space where you don't feel fear about thinking what you think, being who you are, believing what you believe, you have joy. And so I would say that probably most of what's an obstacle to joy is fighting against that, and or putting kind of the world in front of who you are, or not being very clear on who you are, who you want to be.
Perfect. I don't have anything to add. Yeah, that was a great answer. I love it. And I think it gets to, when we think about joy, for me, it's being a child. Like, you're super joyful. Like, it's easy. Like, joy is a baseline. It's, you know, things happen with kids and they might cry. They might be upset, but then they go right back to playing. Yeah. They go right back to that. And that really is, in a sense, who you are. You're just being yourself. You're really in touch. And so as an adult, we can be like, oh, it's getting in touch with your inner child, or it's all this, but it really is just being yourself at your core.
But also, that's a really good illustration for some of the other pieces I said as well, because when I think about a child and like childlike joy, I also think about, like, they don't care who's watching. They don't care, you know, who saw when they fell down or when they messed up something. That they're not held back. So like you said, they just do something, then they can come back to it and do something else. And that they're exploring and curious about the world around them. It feels like, for a child, not in a negative way, but like they don't care about everything else around them. I'm focused on, you know, all these things in front of me, and I'm present. So that helps me also to get an understanding of what joy means when you think about it in that way. Like, how does a kid behave? How does a child behave before, like, all the pressures and, you know, the norms and all the things start to infiltrate how you behave?
Exactly. All of those are blockades. Like, what it sounds like, one thing I wrote down was that they experience their emotions big and unashamed. Like, they're not ashamed to have a big tantrum or to do this, because to them, that's a big thing. And like, they're not afraid to ask questions and to explore. It's only as we get older and then life starts weighing us down that we become scared to be who we are. We are trying to do things for acceptance rather than to please ourselves. We are looking for external validation, which a lot of times brings that temporary happiness. Like, oh, people liked my picture on Instagram. Whereas if you posted and you felt good about it, then nobody liked it. And you're like, oh, damn, maybe it wasn't as hot as I thought. And then you start questioning yourself. And I feel like, you know, kids, and also I would argue dogs to a certain extent, are great examples, because they have the thing in the moment you step on their paw, they yelp, and then they keep it pushing. Yeah, they don't be looking at you like.
Meanwhile, you be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry.
Exactly. And so when we think about joy, I think that that's a great way to start to think about centering it in your life.
So then my question for you, you said you have intentionally been centering joy. So for the listeners, what do I do? Like, if I want to center joy, what does that mean for how I move through my day to day?
Okay, I'll give some examples. I'll give some thought exercises and some things, like a spectrum, because everybody learns different. Everybody does that. So one, I would say, I want you to think about all of the moments that you can remember when you feel really present and joyful. So what are you doing? Who are you with? Oh, not happiness. Hold on. Like, what are the things that you feel like you're in a flow state when you're doing? Like, hours can go by and you're painting or you're reading a book. Like, that is a childhood thing that brings me happiness, but as a part of my joy is reading. I forgot how much I love to read, because I've been reading so many freaking self-help books that it's like, I feel inundated with trying to fix myself. But when I started reading fiction again, I was like, oh, I forgot. I can, like, just spend so much time. And so thinking about all of the things. So I would do like a little brainstorm and think about all of those things. The last time you remember experiencing joy, what were you doing? Were you at the park? Were you in nature? Think about those things. And then
Can I summarize what you just said by that being a reflection of doing what you actually want to do?
Yes. And
because
for yourself.
Because I was like, because all of a sudden I was like, well, wait a minute. If you're talking about, think of the last time you felt, good doing something, or it made you feel good, then I'm like, well, that's like, what are these happy moments, right? But if you bring that back to, like, you're saying to explore what makes you feel good so that you actually just do more of that.
Exactly. And then you can start to look at what am I doing versus what I know actually makes me feel good. And what's the difference? Why am I doing all these things that don't actually make me feel good? Why am I showing up in spaces where I don't feel good, or I don't like doing this, it gives me anxiety, but you do it all the time? Like, thinking about those moments. And so that's one. And then the next thing is thinking about, like, every single day when I choose joy. An example of that is, like, when I wake up, I have like 10 to 30 minutes, depending on how long I sleep, just for myself. And each day I allow myself the levity, the option to do whatever I want in that time. And it's like, oh man, today I feel like reading. I'm going to make a cup of coffee. I'm going to read for 20 minutes, and then I'm going to start my day. And that brings me a lot of peace, and it's in alignment with who I am. Another way to think about that is, like, man, this job is paying a lot of money. Like you have 2 client options, right? Same day, you got to pick one or the other. This job is bringing me a lot of money, but I don't really like, being in front of the camera. I don't really want to do that, but I would have to, but it brings me a lot of money. Versus I get to be the creative designer on this thing and I love it, but it's not as much money. I'm going to say, obviously if you need the money, take it, but do the thing that feels more right within yourself. And it's a constant, like, looking at all of your choices throughout the day. But then we get into, well, it looks like happiness because if I wake up and I want a donut, then I'm going to eat a donut because that's what brings me joy. No, that's happiness. If you think about your overarching goal, what's in alignment with your authentic self and what your big goals are for yourself and what makes you feel good overall, like your contentment, you eat healthy, you eat foods that feel good to you, you take care of your body, you move your body every day. That is your baseline. Those are the things that guide your decisions, not on a whim. Oh, I need a sugar high, I'm gonna go do this thing. Or I told myself I wasn't gonna drink for 30 days and now I'm drinking because I feel like I need to drink. And so always checking to make sure your decisions are in alignment with your authentic self, your higher self.
So what would you say that you were doing before you were intentionally centering joy?
I just don't think I was being intentional about my joy. I think I was
and it makes a big difference to actually be intentional because if you're not, not always, but like being intentional about a thing guarantees it being there.
100%.
As opposed to sometimes it's this, sometimes it's kind of that.
Some people might be watching this that who know me at least are like, you're always joyful. You're always going to the park and reading. You're always going to the beach. You're doing a lot of things that make you happy all the time. Exactly. But like, is it in alignment? Am I being intentional about everything? And I'm not saying it's something else you should add to your plate to beat yourself up about, to worry about, to stress about. But how can you be more intentional about each and every decision throughout the day? How can you actually center your joy and center your life around things that are in alignment with who you are? Like, what would that look like? And so I actually got this idea from Bashar, which I've talked about him before. Y'all can Google him, Bashar on YouTube. But also on the emotion scale, joy is at the top of the emotion scale. It's just that general contentment. I actually looked up the difference between nirvana, which in Buddhism or in yoga is like what the thing that people try to go for. And that's actually beyond joy and sorrow. So they say that nirvana allows for the full experience of pleasure and pain without attaching to anything. So it's a little bit different than nirvana when I'm talking about centering joy.
But I think about that detachment. To me, with this new reframe definition that I'm trying to grasp onto, I can be like, without a doubt, yes, that is how it feels. Because to be joyful then, and for me, when I said that, the way I kind of defend how I don't need to summon it up earlier is because I really was just saying, like, that's kind of how I feel. Like, if I do what I want to do, and we just had conversations about that recently on the podcast, and I'm okay with what happens around me because I'm doing what I want to do, then it's like, yeah, I'm always kind of detached from, if this thing happens, what I want to happen, if other things come that, might, kick out from underneath me, like, oh, shoot. But whatever happens, you can kind of just flow through it because you're okay. And then, like, there's a level of joy in understanding how within, like, just being yourself and in whatever space, that's, like, what works best for you. Like, you're always, and not always, but, like, you're just more in tune and aligned. And so the things around you just don't affect you as much. And I think that that's powerful because now I am not dictated. My mood or these emotions and the parts that are fleeting are not dictated by what happens around me because you're choosing to be joyful, I guess.
And if you build your life in alignment with who you are, your most authentic self, if you're doing those things that can help you stay in this base level of contentment, it sounds like it also builds up resilience. So then you're really not swayed as much by things like, and I think also there's an understanding, like whenever you are doing everything that you can for yourself, that everything is working out for you, even if it doesn't look how you thought it would. And so there's like a peace that kind of comes from living your life that way, a peace and a resilience.
Does the amount of happy moments that we have in our day-to-day in our life affect us being joyful? Or that does?
No, I don't think that I don't think they're like, I wouldn't say, what am I talking about?
Well, so for example, like,
they're not directly correlated.
You know how people will talk about how maybe somebody who they may not have a lot of money, they could be a pauper. Well, that's such a throwback term. But like, let's just say like you're somebody who doesn't have any, you have no money, you're just out here, right? And you know how sometimes people like that can have a lot of joy, or it just seems like they're great. But does having certain circumstances and again like those happy moments, or like having a friends, having the money to do what you want to do, having da 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 da, does that make it easier to be joyful, or is it like regardless of what's happening, like the joy is you're coming to a space how you come to the space? You come.
I was say, look at all these millionaires and billionaires who are unhappy, who have thoughts of not being on this earth, who don't want to be here, who are so torn up inside, and I think it's because you're doing life not for yourself, not for your own reasons, and therefore you don't feel fulfilled. Like that's when you gain the whole world but lose your soul. The idea about joy is centering your soul, and I think that like that is what keeps you anchored down no matter what's happening. Like you can have things, not have things, but I think joy is a choice regardless of life circumstances. And I'm not saying like, hey, all this crazy shit is happening, choose joy right now. But I think there's a level of contentment that we can learn to master within ourselves, like regardless. And then you show up into every space. And when you bring that energy, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, self-mastery is joy. And self-mastery is like the key to being able to enjoy life. So to kind of wrap this up then, Carlie, what would you recommend, or like what are your suggestions for folks who maybe now thinking like, okay, how do I center joy a little bit more? We've already said, you know, knowing yourself and all that, right? So I don't think we necessarily have to get into like figure out what you like and all that. But what are some other things that somebody can do?
I think you can look at to practice is like, okay, I think a very easy way to start is to look at your physical environment, like your space. Does your space bring you joy? Is it in alignment? Like one, is it clean? Can you think in a clean environment? No, you should probably do that, maybe declutter. But then also, like I like warm, cozy moments. I'm in this space where I want to make my home feel like it's somewhere I want to be, even if it's not my end goal dream home, which is I haven't tricked it out the way I want to. Like all those things can be true. And also like in this moment, what would make me more joyful in my space? More plants, I'm hanging up more art, I'm doing things that's not happiness.
That's not what I'm thinking.
I was about to say,
what I'm thinking now though is this isn't going against what you're saying, because I agree that making sure your environment reflects a space that makes you feel good is important. And yet now I'm immediately thinking back to that pauper who was like, well, still what we're saying requires us to do something and requires us to have a means to do that, right? Like the pauper who doesn't have a home or the whatever.
And so here's one, I want to be very clear. I'm not saying you should be happy if you're poor and don't have means to do the things that you want to do, because I've been there. Like that doesn't feel good, and I'm not saying that.
Do what you can with what you have in your space. Do what you can with what you have.
I have seen so many people, and although I hate the pictures in third world countries of being very happy, like there's a picture of these little Filipino kids holding up a big old leaf when it's raining. They're doing what they can. They're still finding the joy in the moment and finding the opportunity and having curiosity. You're not letting your external environment dictate how you feel, and I think that's the biggest piece. I'm just using physical reality because I think it's easier for people whenever they can do a physical thing to then understand it. So that's why I said start there. But every day, like, pick what feels like baseline good and content and is in alignment with who you are. What are the decisions that you're making? Like, you get home and you watch 5 hours of Netflix. Does that feel good to you? Like, is that helping you be who you are? Is that pouring into you, filling your soul? Like, honestly, are those things doing that? If so, yes, cool. If not, then what would feel better? You know, is there an opportunity to try a new thing every day? You know, I'm gonna try to draw today. All you need is a pencil and some paper. You know, I'm gonna save up and get some watercolors. Next week I can try that if that feels good to me. Do I want to go sit and read my book outside instead of inside of my house? And building your life in a way that feels authentic and good to you.
I agree with all of that. And two other things that I will add to that. One is being sure to practice gratitude. When you practice gratitude, you are in a space where you are okay with everything around you, and it's a reminder of how well you're doing and how well you feel and what's good about your life, and then two, it at least takes space away from overthinking other things, right, and other negative emotions you might have. So that's one. And then the second one, which is going along with what you're saying about choosing yourself and the things you do and what's around you, I would say maybe practice a little bit more spontaneity. When you have a free day, or if you have the opportunity, just think about something like,
do it.
Oh, let me go see this movie.
Do it.
Or think about, let me just go to the park.
Do it.
Whatever you're thinking, right? Your first mind your first thoughts, just decide to go do something, because when you kind of start thinking about stuff and now you're trying to filter it through other lenses, it's not quite as authentic. So that's a way to like get to that authentic piece, is when you feel like doing something, then you go do it as it's aligned with who you are, which may not be, dang, let me just order this Krispy Kreme. It may be, let me go for a walk.
And I think people are like, well, what if I'm supposed to be working on a script? I shouldn't be out there at the park reading a book. But you never know. Like, I full-heartedly believe that, like, if your first mind is like, just go read your book at the park for 30 minutes, maybe you go there and then you get the inspiration you need to finish your script on the part you've been stuck on. Maybe you meet somebody or see a thing or do a thing. Like, you never know why you have the intuition to do a certain thing. And so in those moments, I think it's important to listen to it. And the more you can get in touch with who you are, the more you fine tune that. And I think life just starts to give you more opportunities and synchronicities.
And with that same example, when you're telling yourself, no, I can't do that because I should be doing something else, you're literally just blocking what you want to do 100%. In that time. And so it just now makes that thing that you are working on a task, a work, you know, it's
a
not,
block.
Yeah, it's not like the same vibe as like, well, I can go do this and be fine. And I love that about my life right now. I feel like very often, regardless of what's on my to-do list or what I have going on, I can always kind of do what I want and everything is fine. So that being said, what happens is I'm coming into my day more comfortable, even if I started at 11 p.m. because I spent an hour reading and now I get my work done in a couple of hours. Or, you know, it's just not that franticness of in the past, like waking up being like, oh, I got all this stuff to do. Not to say I'm never stressed or feel like that, because even right now I'm like so tired from like just really going hard. And it's like, I actually do need a day. And yet you can decide like how you come to moments that you need to get things done, as well as what you can do with your time, which makes it important to take, what's the word I'm looking for? Take like inventory kind of.
Oh, yeah.
Or maybe inventory is the word I'm looking for. But taking inventory of your time, how you spend it, because then you kind of realize like, I don't have no excuse to like not do the things that I need to do and want to do. Because like Carlie said, at the end of the day, if you were like, I just sat on the sofa for 5 hours watching Netflix, if that is not adding, if you can take stock of how things are affecting your energy, does this feel kind of low frequency, this person, this place, this thing I'm doing, whatever, analyze everything in that way to realize which activities, which people, what things in your life are adding and helping you to feel easily more in a joyful place, as opposed to the opposite. And those are the things you gravitate more towards with your time, in order for all of your time to feel like it's yours.
Yeah, this sounds like just owning your life and owning your choices and making sure that you're choosing yourself and choosing joy.
Yeah. So in choosing joy and in centering joy, hit up Carlie for more for more on that. I feel like I do this. I'm not gonna hold y'all. Like I feel like I do this. And so it's kind of hard to like explain to somebody maybe how to do things, whatever you want to do. And yet I will say, listening to this episode, think about ways that you can center joy. And by that, it mostly means do what you want without thinking about all the other people around you. Live y'all life, folks. We hope you enjoyed this episode on centering joy. We hope that you have a joyful week. Well, life. With happy moments in it this week.
All the happy moments. And we'll see y'all next week.
Bye-bye.